Thank you, Wendy. You don't want to hear from me, but I want to introduce you to my friend. And then after he speaks, we're going to be taking questions, and I'll field those questions, which will be directed to Sam. Sam Chan is Dr. Sam Chan. If you were in chapel, you heard me say that he is a doctor twice over. He is a medical doctor, and weirdly, for someone who's in full-time Christian ministry, he actually still works in the Sydney hospital system as a doctor. He wants to be part of the real world. He wants to exercise his rational brain and be part of the Sydney environment. He then went on to do a real doctorate in a PhD in rhetoric. Specifically, those of you who are into rhetoric, speech act theory, as it pertains to Christian proclamation. He's not going to be nerdy about persuasion, but you're going to hear someone who loves the art of persuasion, who thinks that Christianity's influence in the world is not through legislation and politics, let alone armies, but is through simple argumentation. That's what you're going to hear today. Dr. Sam Chan is the author of 4 books, 2 of which I set students to read, the father of 3 children and the husband of 1 wife. Will you please welcome Dr. Sam Chan.
Thanks so much. Thanks for that. So, we once thought smoking was good for us, but we don't believe that anymore. When I was in medical school, they taught us that stomach ulcers were caused by acid, but that's not true anymore. When I was a kid, they told me that if I ate my vegetables, I would grow to be tall. But that wasn't true. There are so many things we get told that are no longer true. We always look back at previous generations and we roll our eyes at what they used to believe. But that only means future generations are going to look back at us and judge us as wrong. They too will roll their eyes at what we believe. See, what makes us think that we, for the first time in human history, have got everything right? No, we're exactly the same as those who have come before, and one day history will judge us to be wrong. Now, it's okay to be wrong about vegetables, but what if we're wrong about matters of faith? What if we're wrong about Jesus? So our question tonight is this: how do I know if Jesus is true? So I'm going to try to answer this now in a 30-minute talk, followed by question and answer from you guys. So as I'm speaking, think of whatever question you want to ask and then just send them through to us, and I'll do my best to answer those questions. So our question is, how do I know if Jesus is true? Now, there's a story in the Bible that I'm going to reference to answer this question. Now, every year when I give talks about Jesus from the Bible, I love going through the internet and thinking, what would Jesus look like if he was here today? And I did this last year at a church, and someone in the church came up to me afterwards and said, Stop it. Stop going through the internet and trying to find a picture of what you think Jesus will look like today. And I said, why? And then he said, because if Jesus was alive today, he would look like me. He would be a short, tanned, Middle Eastern, nondescript male. So from now on, I'm going to say, hey, if Jesus was alive today, this is what he would look like. But the Bible hints that Jesus wasn't that good looking. So I think this guy's way too good looking to be Jesus. Now, in the Bible, there's a story that you and I probably have heard before, where Jesus dies on a cross, but he rises from the dead 3 days later, and then he appears in front of his followers. But one of his followers, Thomas, was not there to see it. And so when all the other followers say, hey, Thomas, we have seen Jesus risen from the dead, Thomas goes, no, I'm sorry. I cannot believe that. And then Thomas says, unless I see with my own eyes, unless I touch with my own hands, I cannot believe that Jesus has risen from the dead. But a few days later, Jesus appears again, this time in front of Thomas. And this time Thomas does see, Thomas does touch. And then he says, my Lord, my God, and he welcomes Jesus into his life. So let's go back to our question then. How do I know if Jesus is true? Well, I want to begin by saying this. You know what? Jesus can't be true. I'm sorry. People do not rise from the dead. Let's have a look at the story. Now, Thomas was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, hey, we have seen the Lord. But Thomas said, no. Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, unless I put my finger where the nails were, unless I put my hand into the side, I'm sorry, I will not believe. Thomas says, no, I will not believe. And you know what? I'm with Thomas here. I am a person of the sciences. I'm a medical doctor. I am trained in evidence-based belief. And I'm here to tell you, people do not rise from the dead. I'm with Thomas on this one. When I was a little boy, I was watching TV, and then the ad for the movie Psycho came on. And we all know the movie Psycho. Some guy with a knife comes in and attacks someone in the shower. I was so traumatized by this that I actually could not take a shower by myself for the next 2 years. But you can't blame me, because that's what it's like to be a child. When you're a child, you believe things you cannot see. When you're a child, you believe there are monsters under your bed. You believe in unicorns. You believe in the fairy godmother. But when we grow up, we stop believing in things we can't see. So I'm sorry, if you want me to believe in God, angels, miracles, and people rising from the dead, well, you may as well ask me to believe in the fairy godmother. I'm with Thomas on this one. People do not rise from the dead. Jesus can't be true. So let's go back to our original question then. How do I know if Jesus is true? Let me give us 3 things we might be able to hang on to here. 3 things that might help us in answering this question. And the first thing is this. How do we know if anything is true? Let's just zoom out and ask the bigger meta question. How do we know what we know? The story goes like this. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and this time Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then Jesus said to Thomas, "Come on, put your finger here, see my hands, reach out your hand, put it in my side, stop doubting and believe." Thomas sees Jesus with his own eyes. Thomas touches Jesus with his own hands, and he believes. But how do we form our beliefs? Well, this is a crash course in epistemology. Epistemology is the philosophy of knowledge. How do we know what we know? So let's take a crash course in epistemology. If I make this truth claim, 1 + 1 = 2, well, that's a mathematical truth claim, and to prove it, we use the tools of deduction and logic. But if I make the truth claim, the sky is blue, well, this is an appeal to the senses. And we prove this by using empiricism. Let's say my truth claim now is this: water boils at 100 degrees Celsius or 212 Fahrenheit. This is a scientific truth claim. And to do this, to prove this, we need the tools of induction and experiments. Give me a repeatable, observable experiment. It's a scientific method. Let's try this truth claim. World War I ended in 1918. Well, this is a historical truth claim. How do we prove this? Well, we're going to need eyewitnesses, testimony, and documents. Let's say the truth claim now is this: I am innocent of crime. Well, this is a legal truth claim. To prove this, we're going to need eyewitnesses and testimony. Let's say the truth claim is this now. Lisa cooks a good pancake. Well, this is a know-how truth claim. Does Lisa know how to cook a good pancake? And to prove this, we're going to need testimony. Someone will say, you know what? I've eaten Lisa's pancakes and they are good. But you may say, no. I need to experience it for myself. So we need experience. Let's say I come home and my wife says, I love you. How do I prove this? Do I tell her, hey, give me a blood sample, give me an x-ray, give me a repeatable, observable scientific experiment? No, because this is a relational truth claim. And to prove this, well, we're going to need trust. Do I trust her at her word? We're going to need testimony. My friends are going to say, hey, I think your wife does love you. But in the end, it's a relational truth claim. I have to commit to the relationship to know. I have to relate to my wife to know if my wife loves me. Now, what do you notice about this list of truth claims? Well, it's this. There's actually a spectrum. At the top, it's really easy to verify these truth claims. If you want to know the sky is blue, just look out there for yourself. But as we come down the bottom, these truth claims may be true, but they get harder and harder to verify. And that's why traditionally in education we divide this into the sciences and the humanities. Up the top, they're the hard sciences. In the middle, they're the softer sciences. And down the bottom, wow, it's the arts and the humanities. Now, us Asians, we love the sciences. We love the sciences because it's just true and false. It's multiple choice questions. It's so easy. They're just throwing marks at you. It's too easy. But down the bottom, us Asians don't like the arts and the humanities. No multiple choice questions here. This is where you have to write papers. You have to do argumentation. On the one hand this, on the other hand that. This person says this, but this person says that. We don't like papers. That's arts and humanities. But even here, we realize, you know what? This is a little bit naive because even the sciences aren't as hard and fixed as we think they are. Bertrand Russell, famous atheist UK philosopher, he critiqued the scientific method as this. He said science relies upon the fact that relies on the fact that tomorrow will be the same as today. But science can't guarantee that to be true. Science just has to take that as a brute force fact. And in fact, science is a lot softer than we think it is. Because for science to be true, science needs these things to be true, but science can't prove these things to be true, yet it needs them to be true. For example, for science to be true, we need the universe to be ordered. For science to be true, we need the rules of logic to apply. For science to be true, we need our senses and memories to be reliable. And for science to be true, we need other minds to exist. Now, science needs these things to be true, but science can't guarantee that they are true. We just have to take them as a given fact. So how do we know things to be true? This is where we realize we probably know things to be true more on what I call the Asian shoe problem. What is the Asian shoe problem? This is the Asian shoe problem. If you visit your Asian friend's house, they make you take your shoes off before you can go in. And so now you have a problem. You have paid $100 for your shoes and only $1 for your socks. So now you're wandering around in $1 socks. And now you think, you know what? If you visit an Asian, you should pay $100 for your socks and only $1 on your shoes because you're not going to be able to wear them around. But the Asian shoe problem is really this. When you visit your Asian friend's house, you have to take your shoes off at the doorway. But everyone else has taken their shoes off at the doorway. So when you come back out, there is a mountain of shoes to choose from. How do you know which pair of shoes are yours? But of course, it's not really a problem because you simply go for the shoes of best fit. They're your shoes. How do we know what we know to be true? Actually, it comes down to this. We look for the explanation of best fit. What best explains the data? What best explains my experience? And what best explains testimony? And in the end, when it all comes down to it, really, it all comes down to trust and testimony. Do I trust the testimony of those I trust? It's actually how we form almost everything that we know to be true. Do I trust the testimony of those I trust? Now, I'm an Australian wandering into America, and I know America right now is very polarised, very divided. So I feel like I'm wandering into a minefield here. So I'm treading with caution, and I don't want to cause division. But let's do a survey here, like hands up here. Who here in this room believes that the earth is round? Oh, okay, majority of you. Thank you. Hands down, hands down, hands down. Hands up in this room. Who here has been in a spaceship to prove that the earth is round? Oh, nobody. So we all believe the earth is round because that's what they tell us. Hands up here. Who believes they have a brain inside their head? All right, thank you, hands up. Majority opinion. Now, hands up, who here has seen their own brain with their eyes and touched their own brain with their hands? Oh, almost nobody. And those sheepishly putting your hands up, you're saying, oh, I've seen the MRI scan. Yeah, but do you know how an MRI scanner works? Do you think the doctor knows how an MRI scanner works? No. At this moment, we just trust what they tell us. That's how the scan works, and that is the brain, and you have a brain inside your head. All right, hands up here. Who here believes that water boils at 212 Fahrenheit? Oh, okay, most hands are going up, so majority opinion. Hands up here. Who has done the experiment to prove that it boils at 212 Fahrenheit? Oh, it's like 10% of the room. Thank you. Hands down. Hands up if when you did the experiment, it really did boil at 212 Fahrenheit. Oh, maybe 3 hands went up. Right. So for most of us, it did not boil at 212 Fahrenheit. And at that moment, we said, there's something wrong with my experiment. We're not at sea level, maybe my thermometer's wrong, my water's wrong. So at that moment, we chose to believe what our eyes did not see. Because they tell us water boils at 212 Fahrenheit, so it must boil at 212 Fahrenheit. We trust the testimony of those we trust. All right, this one can get a little bit sensitive, but hands up here, who believes that mum and dad really are their mum and dad? Oh, okay, majority. Thank you, hands down. Hands up who's done the DNA test. Oh, okay, only a handful. Wow. So most of us choose to believe mum and dad at their word when they say they really are our mum and dad. And if we do the DNA test, usually that's because trust has broken down somewhere. We form most of our knowledge simply based on the fact that we trust the testimony of those we trust. So let's take this to number 2 then. Knowing this, how can we know if Jesus is true? Number 2, how can we know if Jesus really is true? Let's go back to the story. Then Jesus said to Thomas, put your finger here, see my hands, reach out your hand, put it into my side, stop doubting and believe. Then Jesus told him, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written. Why? That you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. Thomas believes because he sees Jesus. He touches Jesus. But we can't see Jesus. We can't touch Jesus. So how can we believe? How do we know if Jesus is true? Let's go back to our chart here. Where would you put this religious claim? God loves you. See, the Bible never tries to prove that God exists. That's just a given. What the Bible does try to prove is this: God loves you. It's a religious truth claim. But where would you put it on this list? Well, in the Bible, God proves that he loves you by sending his son Jesus to die for us in our place. So we would say, you know what, that's a historical truth claim because it happened at a time in history. So to prove that, we're going to need eyewitnesses, testimony, and documents. It's also a legal truth claim. Can you prove it in a court of law? So we're going to need eyewitnesses and testimony. It's also a know-how truth claim. Does God know how to love you? We're going to need the testimony of others. Yep, God does know how to love me, and we're going to have to experience it for ourselves. But in the end, it's a relational truth claim. So the way to prove it is we have to trust God at his word. We have to rely on the testimony of others. Yes, God is really good at loving. But in the end, we're going to have to relate. We won't know until we commit to the relationship. It's also an explanation of best fit. How do I know if Jesus is true? Well, what best fits? What best explains that there is something instead of nothing? This universe didn't have to be here, but it is. Why is there something instead of nothing? We also have to explain the fine-tuning of this universe. If anything in this universe was out by only just 0.0001 of a degree, there would be no human life on this planet. So what best explains that? What best explains that somehow life came from non-life? Well, we're going to have heaps of scientific theories on what happens when that happens, but how do we explain that life somehow came from non-life? What best explains the existence of rational, intelligent thought in you and me? See, atoms and molecules don't have rational, intelligent thought. We're only the sum of our parts. So how do we get rational, intelligent thought? What best explains this? We believe in love as the highest moral ideal. Atoms and molecules don't love each other. Where do we get love from? What best explains freedom? Atoms and molecules don't have free will, but we have free will. But at the same time, we believe in moral accountability. We don't hold atoms and molecules to moral accountability, but we hold each other to moral accountability. What best explains the idea that there's purpose? We're here for a reason. What best explains the idea of mercy and also forgiveness? Why do we think it's good to forgive? What also best explains Jesus' teachings? Because they're brilliant. What best explains Jesus' own self-awareness, that he actually believes he's the Son of God? Who does that? But at the same time, Jesus has a willing self-sacrifice. He deliberately marches to the cross to die. What Son of God does that? And what best explains the disciples' change of life? In the end, it comes down to this: trust and testimony. Can I trust the testimony of the disciples at their word? And again, it's how we believe almost everything to be true. So when we come to a stop sign, we stop. Why? Because we take it at its word. We believe it. When the teacher says there is a paper due tomorrow, we believe her. Why? Because we believe her, take her at her word. When you go to McDonald's and they say this meal will be $10, why do we believe it? Because we take them at their word. When my 3 boys go shopping on the internet and they want to buy a Rubik's Cube from China and they want to plug my credit card details into the website, how do I know if this Rubik's Cube will come? I take this person at their word and I trust that the Rubik's Cube really will come. And hands up, who drove here tonight? Who drove here? Okay, hands down. Hands up if before you came here, you checked under your car for a bomb. Whoa, because, there could have been a bomb. We all live very dangerous, interesting lives, don't we? But somehow we believe there was sufficient evidence, even without us looking out of the car, there was sufficient evidence there was no bomb. We live most of our lives based on trust and testimony. And based on those same standards of proof, there's sufficient evidence that Jesus Christ really did rise from the dead. But the third thing is this. The third thing we can hang on to is this. Jesus isn't just true. Jesus is what I need to be true. Back to the story. Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. Jesus isn't just true, we need him to be true. Thomas welcomes Jesus into his life, and it's life-giving and it's life-changing. When we walk into the room, the first thing we look for is this. We need a power outlet. Why? So boom, we can plug in our phone. Oh, and the instant you do it and you see this symbol, we are flooded with happy hormones because we know, our phone is being charged. And in the same way, when we plug into Jesus, we are flooded by his life-giving words. See, we don't just want, it's not just that Jesus is true, we need him to be true. Just look at these words of Jesus. Love each other as I have loved you. This isn't just true, this is good for us. If this is true, this is good for us. Look at these words. Do to others as you would like them to do to you. This isn't just true. This is beautiful. If we live this way, this will be beautiful for humanity. And then Jesus says, what good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose their soul? This is wise. And then Jesus says, you need to be born again. This is life-giving. And then Jesus says, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. This is life-changing. Jesus isn't just true, he's good, he's beautiful, he's wise, he's life-giving, and he's life-changing. So back to our original question, it was this. How do I know if Jesus is true? And today we've looked at this. How do we know if anything is true? Well, based on those same standards of proof, I have sufficient evidence that Jesus really is true. But more than that, he isn't just true, he's good, he's beautiful, he's wise, he's life-giving, and he's life-changing. What do you like when you receive a phone call from a number you don't recognize? It's usually delete, because you don't know the number, so you can't trust the person. But what if you do know the person? How much can we trust this person? This is a picture of my friends Richard and Tricia. They've been married for 30 years now, but it almost didn't happen. Because when Richard and Tricia first started dating, and then Richard said to Tricia, I love you, Tricia didn't know whether she could trust Richard or not. So she did a police search. But it came up negative. But that doesn't prove anything. He could just be very good at being very bad. So in the end, she just had to commit. She had to commit to the relationship. And that's how she knew. And in our journey of life, it's the same. How do we know? How do we know if Jesus really is true? Well, in the end, we're just going to have to surrender to the evidence and commit. And only then will we know that Jesus isn't just true, but he's good, he's beautiful, he's wise, he's life-giving, and he's life-changing.